here is your vice president, who today was the only one at the Mayo Clinic seen not wearing a mask, touring COVID wards and testing facilities at a huge hospital, no mask. A short flight away from returning to the White House to come in contact with the most senior members of our government, no mask. Earlier today, the clinic posted that it has, quote, informed the vice president of the masking policy prior to his arrival today. That post was since taken down. Then came a statement that the masking policy had been shared with Pence's office. Note that the CDC issued guidelines recommending masks earlier this month. Also, please note Pence is the head of the coronavirus task force. Here's how Pence responded when questioned about his decision to defy the Mayo Clinic policy.
I'm tested for the coronavirus on a regular basis, and everyone who is around me is tested for the coronavirus. And when the CDC issued guidelines about wearing a mask, it was their recognition that people that may have the coronavirus could prevent the possibility of conveying the virus to someone else by wearing a mask. And since I don't have the coronavirus, I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to be here, to be able to speak to these researchers, these incredible healthcare personnel, and look them in the eye and say thank you.
A reminder, a negative test result means you were negative when you were tested, and an hour after you take that test, that could change. As you saw right there, Mike Pence said in his own defense today that he wanted to be able to look the healthcare workers in the eye. And a final safety note here, if your mask obstructs your vision, you're doing it wrong. Task force briefing didn't happen at the White House. Head of the task force was in the Twin Cities, not wearing a mask, which became the story. And the instant consensus was a mask would have been seen by his boss as a sign of weakness. Your turn.
The president has made clear since the day the CDC released guidelines advising Americans to wear masks that he was not a fan of a mask, that he did not intend to wear one. There were moments in the briefing room where he almost made fun of a reporter who tried to ask a question wearing a mask, saying he could barely hear him, and was sort of dismissive of the thing. Inside the West Wing, a lot of aides do not wear masks. The few National Security Council officials who do are viewed as alarmists. So Vice President Mike Pence has made very clear throughout this administration that he follows the lead of the president, and he appears to be following his lead with mask policy. I wrote this story today, and I have to say I heard from a really large number of emails I got from former patients at the Mayo Clinic who were really, really outraged by this. Couldn't believe that he would put at risk the people who had saved their lives, or just they saw it as a sign of disrespect to have gone in there without a mask. I don't usually get this number of reader emails. So this really struck a nerve with people who thought he was doing something unsafe, disregarding the Mayo Clinic's own rules, even if he thinks he's abiding by the CDC rules. A lot of people just assumed it was because he didn't want to have a photo op that the president would not approve of.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.